Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Android users can find us and subscribe on your Play Music app. Apple users can find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Stitcher. You can follow us on Spreaker. And you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so that we can spread the word. Let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
And today we have a very special guest. We have Kelly Haines. Kelly and I met, I think back in 2018, whenever Dee Parsons had written Kelly's story about her childhood abuser, who was a school teacher at the time at a Christian school, is right back in ministry. He spent time in prison. He had a light sentence. The abuse took place in my home state, mom's home state of Pennsylvania, and he's now in the state of Vermont preaching at a church that welcomed him with open arms. And Dee Parsons wrote about that, and several other media outlets picked it up. Local papers in Vermont picked it up. And then I wrote part of Kelly's story as well on my blog. So it was an honor both to write the story and just to get to know Kelly. And since then, she has become, I say she, her and her husband have become good friends. And we bump into each other a lot in person. We talk a lot online, and Kelly is a patron of the podcast. So, Kelly, was that a good introduction?
That was great.
All right. So welcome, and thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm really excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. This was not the reason I ever thought I'd be on your podcast, but I think it's something that needs to be talked about. So
yeah, absolutely. So last week's podcast was inspired by your post where you wrote about taking a step back from advocacy, and you had taken a couple short breaks from being online and on social media, and then I think some people may have thought, I'm speculating here, but some people may have thought that was out of nowhere. I didn't think that, just because I had seen you take a couple steps back before. But basically, your post said, I've decided that advocacy is not for me, at least in this season of my life, and I'm going to take a break and just enjoy my family. So I'll let you talk about that and what led you to that decision, which, by the way, we fully support and fully understand.
We absolutely do, Kelly.
Thank you. So really, the reason that I decided to, you're right. I was on and off for probably like the last maybe 4 months, 5 months. I've been saying, okay, I'm going to get on. Then I get off, and then I get on and get off. And I think the final straw was my daughter started having her own mental health issues, and just her struggles, simple everyday growing up struggles. And I realized, like, as a mom, that I was out saving everyone else's children and I was missing my own. Wow. And it was at that moment when she had a total breakdown in our house, and I sat there and I just went over everything that I could think of to like help her get through that moment, that I realized I had spent the last year and a half, like, investing in everybody else except for the people who were under my roof. And it really changed. That was the changing factor for me, because my whole philosophy now is that, if I spend my life trying to save everyone else's kids and lose my own, then I failed. I failed the biggest, assignment that I had been given. And so that was the biggest wake up call for me. A couple other things that were happening that was causing me to go in and out was I think, Claire, you said it last week. It's just the stress of keeping up with the rat race on social media. Like, you can't stay relevant if you're not on every day, all day, posting things that are like up to date or like are current and have people like liking. And that
Right.
got to be like
Yeah.
really hard. It gets really hard when you're a mom, you work full time, you're also in this whole advocacy world. So that takes up your time. Plus, I have a daughter that plays travel softball. We're always gone on weekends. I was literally like, there was literally no time for me. And like the whole self-care thing, that was like, self-care was like sleeping. That was
Right.
what self-care was to me. And so what ended up happening is that I was literally going to work, coming home, and I'd be in bed by 6 o'clock. I wouldn't eat dinner with my family. I wouldn't do anything. I wasn't doing anything. I was sleeping and working. That was it. And I think it was just all of those things that just finally said, this is not what I want my life to be. This was not meant to go this direction. I was meant to empower me and to give me a voice and to give me, the strength to talk about the story and to help other people. And ultimately I'm helping other people and not helping my own self. So.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that last week a little bit, how especially in the Christian circles, there's this expectation that you just give. You give of yourself, you give of your resources, you give of your mind, you give of your heart, you give of your energy, your money, all this stuff. And it's like at some point there has to be this realization that, yes, we are Christians and we're all about serving other people, but there's this other component that's an incredibly important component, and we have families. Like everybody else, we have families, and we have bills to pay. And I think that's what's really hard about advocacy is I know of not one advocate who's out there who's not just drained to the bone. And I know of not one advocate who's out there who's wealthy by doing this. Not a single one.
Right. Right.
And I think that's, man, this just really connects with me, what you're saying, because I have to constantly draw boundaries and I'm not good at doing that. And, there are times where I can feel that strain in the family where I'm getting kind of roped into this advocacy where, like you, I mean, I have a full-time job, which is incredibly demanding. When you have a church, it's tough. So I relate with you totally.
That I think life can be tough sometimes. And Kelly, as a mother speaking to another mother, believe me, I understand what momhood is all about. And you are, in my eyes, doing what you must do for your family. There is no greater service you can give right now than to give your dedication right there, right where you are with your own husband and your children. And believe me, you will be blessed beyond measure for doing so. We don't get second takes in this part of our lives. What we do now resounds with our children forever and ever. And I know with myself, there were so many things I wanted to do when the kids were at home and young and, and life was just totally chaotic. I wanted to write. I wanted to speak. I wanted to travel. I wanted to do, all kinds of things that were noble and good that would have benefited others. But I, like you, made the decision not now. It wasn't the time. And I am so, so thankful. As I look at my children now, I see well-balanced children. I see children who have maintained their balance throughout chaotic times within our family. I see a strength in them, and that couldn't have occurred had I, been giving my all someplace else. So kudos to you for making the decision you made. I think it's
completely.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Another part of the whole thing that really talking about this is that I think when you become an advocate, people know your story, but they forget how much your story still weighs on your heart every time you are talking to someone or you're listening to someone's story. And, even with much healing, which I'm still going through the healing process, other survivors unintentionally are triggering you constantly as a reminder of things that have gone on. And I think that too is the part of the stress, is that, you're trying to be everything to everybody. And at the same time, you have your own, your own story that weighs on your heart. For me, it's been weighing on my heart that his church chose to protect him. There's just so much. So when you're an advocate, you're more than just some person that's not carrying already a big baggage of heaviness.
Yeah.
You've got your own baggage from what you've experienced, and now you've taken on this huge role to try to help other people. And I just don't feel like my mind and body could keep up.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy, Kelly, a really good one. And I think when we get, as you're saying, we each have our own story. And when we take on the stories and the burdens of others, often it does feel like too much. And there are times in my own healing journey where I really just need time to focus on myself to heal, that I don't have the strength and the wherewithal to help somebody else. And I have this philosophy that I live by: unless I am in a good place and unless I'm full, I can't give to others. When I start feeling empty, that's a good warning to step back and start filling myself up again, which is exactly what you're doing.
Right. And it took me a little bit longer than it should have. And people had warned me, like, you're not doing anything. You're sleeping, or you're working, or you're on your phone. And, it took me a little while to really, catch on that, what, I really am losing myself in all this. While I am incredibly grateful that Dee took a moment and told my story and put it out there, I will never regret that decision. It was the best decision I ever did, because I needed to be heard in so many ways, even though I found, people say, well, you got justice. Well, I did get justice, but it was covered. It was okay, I got justice for about 3.5 months while everything was going on. And then as soon as it was over, I was supposed to go back to college and back to being the way I was. I never got a chance to finish, grieving the loss of somebody who I did care about and love, who I thought loved me. I was grieving the whole loss of realizing I lost my childhood and I can't go back. And, it never was something that I could ever deal with. And now, as I'm listening to other survivors, I'm realizing that, this pain is real and it's still there and it needs to be taken care of. And while I can listen to other people and I can understand, I can't help them, because right now I'm still carrying a heavy burden.
I talk about this often, and when you and George were in Lancaster, I talked about this too. There's this message that I think we miss often in the Bible, and I think it's the message of the gospel, where Jesus didn't sit with people until they were all healed and all better. He was constantly moving, and the freedom that he gave people to go sit and be with their families is incredible. That's a gift that I really hammer that message home every place that I speak. I try to hammer that message home, where I'm like, no, the best thing that we can do to survivors of abuse is not to guilt them for not being at church, but to send them home to be with their families and just process together and just laugh together and find yourself, within your family and with your kids and your spouse. And, that's a gift. And Jesus gave that to people often.
And I can tell you, as a survivor and advocate, after everything that I've been through, I do not go to church. I have a church family who is wonderful, who, reaches out and periodically and checks in on me, but I just can't do it. I mean,
Sure.
the whole reason that we met was because I knew that if I could come to your church and sit there, that it was not about the safety. It wasn't about the atmosphere. It was about the safety.
Yes.
And when I got to your church, I got the same exact anxiety and had to leave. And so it was at that moment that I had to look at my husband and my kids and say, listen, like, I can't do this anymore. For the last 20 years, I have been coming and showing up and just being only like here physically, not mentally. And I don't want to do it anymore. And that has been so freeing for me. And, I hear it from other people, but I've learned to just turn it off and say, you know what, I just don't believe that, this is where God wants me right now, because the fact is that I listen to your messages on Sunday. I mean, there's so many messages you can tune into to get the word of God and to do those things. But I was raised that, you have to go to church. You have to go to church every time the doors of the church are open. You have to be there.
Yeah.
And to finally look at my family and say, listen, I want you guys to go. I just can't right now. They ask why. They ask a lot of questions. They're kids. And I've explained to them that that's an environment where I've been hurt very, very deeply. And for me to go there, it's very hard. And what people don't understand is that a lot of times is that, I have a family that I have to explain all of this to, everything that I do. Why am I doing this? Or how am I doing this? Or why do you sleep so much? Or why do you take medication? Like, I have to be able to explain that to my kids. And there's so much that goes on behind closed doors that you don't see. Most people, we just see advocates, fighting so hard online, or, and we don't realize that we still have things going on at home that we're trying to take care of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there are a couple components to that. One, people look to advocates as a source of strength, and you guys are out here and you're doing it, and I need your advice, I need your help, and and we gladly do that. But you're absolutely right. Like, we have our own garbage, all of us, our own struggles, our own families, our own trying to find a sense of balance, and we're all struggling through that. But then you have another camp of people who view advocates as these angry, bitter people who hate the church, and they're just out to destroy it, and they won't stop until they get what they want. And that's exhausting, and that's hurtful for all of us. And we carry that burden with us. So, there are just so many components to what advocates feel. And, I think there's a whole nother level to this when you're a survivor advocate. Because, Mom and I were not abused. Some people say, well, you were still abused by your dad because it was just a different form of abuse. Well, yeah, granted, I get that. I understand that. But at the end of the day, we were not sexually abused. And I think we're able to speak so much more freely to this. And so I just have the deepest respect for survivor advocates, because it does trudge up so much stuff each and every time you talk about it. There's just so much that it brings to the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's story, they're just telling your story, and just something will trigger a memory that maybe you hadn't remembered. Like, I know, even just telling my story from D, and then 3 or 4 months later, just other things, I'm like, oh, I forgot about that, or I don't even remember that, or, you know what I mean? There's just so much. And, I love, and this is the part of me, is I want everyone to have a voice, because I didn't have one for a long time. So I want to hear everyone's story, but I had to look at myself and be honest and say, I can't do that. And it's okay. It's, there's other survivors out there. There's other advocates out there. There's other people you can connect them with. But that was definitely hard for me. And I do have people that I still connect with and talk to, and they've become good friends. I just can't do it for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the beautiful thing about it too, though, is that, through through you telling your story and through the advocacy work that you did for a time, you made some really, really good connections that those relationships, like our relationship, didn't stop when you stopped being an advocate, and
Right.
and I'm sure that's the same for a lot of people that you still have a really close connection with and a good relationship with, and you guys are friends. It's not that you were just an advocate that people reached out to. Like we've gotten to be good friends, and
Right.
that won't stop. So I think that's one of the things that I think will help other advocates who may be in the same situation as you, where they feel that heavy burden that if they walk away, they're letting all these people down. And I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to still have friendships. I think there's absolutely zero shame in stepping down from that kind of work, at least for a season or maybe even permanently.
Right. And you know what? For me, I am a survivor, and I will always be an advocate to some extent. I can't read a story on Facebook or even I'm not on Twitter at all anymore, but on Facebook, and I can't read a story and not sometimes comment or repost it just to make people aware of what's going on. I'm always in my heart going to be an advocate. I just had to take a step back from my the energy that I was putting into it. And so that's why I tell people, I still in my heart am an advocate. And I do believe that God somewhere along the way, after my kids are grown up and out of the house, that there is a place for me and my husband to be a part of that. And I want to, and I'm looking forward to that. If the door opens, great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. But it's so hard. I mean, I think, I believe, let me think. I think it was Clara that said about the guilt. You were so spot on. The guilt of letting people down because you couldn't keep up with the rat race.
Right.
You couldn't keep up with everybody who's spending all their time out there fighting. Some people, I don't know where they get their energy, but the fact is that there is that guilt to that you feel like you're letting people down because, especially in my situation, he's still preaching. So if I don't keep his name out there, then he might just go under the radar again. And I had to really and I still have to daily remind myself that's not my responsibility. I did the best that I could. I have done what everything that I can to, expose him for who he is. And now I just have to sit back and look and remind myself what is my most important job. And that's what my new blog part is my most important job right now is mom. And that's what I want to be. And it's been good. I mean, I think over
awesome.
the last 2-3 weeks, I've seen such a change in our whole family that I think it's going to be good. It's hard because, you do feel like you're afraid you're going to lose the friendships that you made. But if you read the comments of all the comments that were made after that post, that really gave me a peace because everyone that commented that said anything was like, we're still here. We're not going anywhere. Just because you're stepping away doesn't mean that we're going anywhere. That doesn't account for the 20 or 30 inbox messages I got of the same message. Yeah. So I think that just helped a lot too. So it's hard because
isn't it weird, Kelly, that sometimes we have to defend ourselves or feel that we owe an explanation for doing what we know is right and best for us. It's
especially with family.
It is.
That's what I'm saying. Bizarre to me. That should be the one that everybody celebrates.
We shouldn't feel guilty about that at all. There is no better thing that we can be doing on face of this earth than to be strengthening within our own families. There's nothing better than that. And everything else then just, is extra bonus. What you did in advocacy will not be forgotten. You are always an advocate. You always will be. Your name is engraved on many, many hearts and souls for what you did and continue to do by your example. And there is no greater example than that which you show within your home. I will go to my grave saying that there is nothing better we can do than to live what we speak within our homes. I mean that. So, I'm just thankful for you and for the example that you're giving other advocates right now who may be feeling this overwhelming guilt and burnout, and they need a rest. Jesus himself, what did he do? He would get in a boat and go over on the other side of the water and take a rest. He didn't feel guilty about it. Yeah. When he needed a break, he needed a break. Just said, leave me alone. I need time to recap, regroup, pray, just get my own strength back. We should feel the same way. It's we should not feel that guilt or the need to go into any lengthy, explanation to others. I think the older I've gotten, I feel more sure within myself about that. I don't owe the world an explanation. I just know that I need to do what is right for me right now. Same as what you're doing, right. What is right for you right now.
Kelly.
And I've had, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, it is the truth. Claire, you said it on the last episode. I have had overwhelming people reaching out and supporting me.
Right.
So overwhelming that almost that's a part of pulling out is like, oh my word, like I have so many people supporting me and I still can't carry the load. But I am so thankful and grateful for all of those people that have come alongside of me. Many of them are going to forever be friends that I will never forget.
Yep.
And, it is a world when you are a survivor and you live in the real world where you're around people that you don't talk about survivorship, you feel like there's always something missing. Mm-hmm. When you're in with a group of survivors all together, it's so healing.
It is.
And you never want to give that up, but you have to realize that, that's only a small part of my life.
Yep.
And, but I cannot, every single friend and person that has come into my life in the last year and a half, I'm so eternally grateful for them because they've given me the chance to just be myself and to be able to figure out who I am.
Yeah, Kelly, I was going to say, you and I had talked about just the number of advocates who had reached out to you whenever you put that message up saying, hey, I'm feeling the same way. Like I'm close to burnout, or I'm already burned out. And, I could probably think of probably 5 just off the top of my head, 5 people who've already taken a step back from advocacy. And I could probably think of 5 to 8 more who I personally know who are thinking about taking a step back. So what would your message be to those who are kind of on the fence and that they have that tension of feeling that guilt about, that this community needs me versus the realization that, at some point I need to take a break or I'm going to break? What would your message be to them?
So that's a hard question. I would like to have had a lot of time to think about, but I think off the top of my head, I think the best thing I kept going back and forth because I wasn't sure. And I think that when I finally put out that message of this is what is happening, and I got to hear the response back, that really solidified for me that I was doing the right thing because I needed to hear that. I needed to know that the people that I have now grown to love and appreciate are going to still stand behind me in my decision. So sometimes I think we're afraid to even just put it out there that we're at this point because of whatever reason. There's tons of reasons that each person may have personally why they don't want to tell someone they're burned out or they can't do it anymore. So I would just definitely encourage people to either, you don't have to put it out on Facebook like I did, but maybe reach out to myself or to someone else who is like, who's deciding to step back and just express yourself and see the kind of reaction you get, I think you'll be very surprised. I also think that you have to remember that your kids, your family, the people in your life, they're only there for such a short time. And you don't want to lose that time. And I can say that I lost a year of my family because I got too involved, and I don't want to lose another year. My oldest is going to be going off to college in another year. So you really just have to sit down with yourself, and it's all part of the self-care part, is say to yourself, is this really benefiting me the way I had thought it was going to when I first started? And when I answered that question, my answer was no. What I had hoped to happen and what had happened was two different things. And that's when, I don't want people to wait until their daughter or their family member has a mental health issue for them to have to realize that, oops, I wasted too much time.
Yeah.
So it's just speak your heart, tell people how you're feeling, get encouragement, and just find that time to just say it is okay, because there's tons of people out there that are picking up for us while we're resting, and then we'll pick up for them when they're resting.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Thank you. Well, I think that's going to be a wrap for that. And I can't thank you enough. And man, I've been excited since you reached out and we connected and said that we were going to have you and talk about this subject. I've been very excited, and you didn't disappoint. This was really, really good. So, and incredibly helpful, incredibly encouraging. I love to hear that you have support, that people stand behind you, and that's just really super cool. And I hope that encourages everybody who might be on the fence and who's thinking about it and decides to take that step to take rest.
Amen. Kelly, thank you again. Yep. It's awesome.
You're very welcome.
Yes, getting to know you in such an intimate way. And I appreciate everything that you've shared today. And I think that we need to remember that within the world of survivors, there is a comradeship and a support that will never end. So we're here. I loved your idea of kind of when one feels the need to drop out, there's another one or two to pick up the pace, and we need to let them, and it goes on, so thank you ever so very much. On. Yes.
The only person that I know that keeps going on and it doesn't stop ticking is Krista Brown. I don't know how she does it.
Yeah. I'm like you. I don't know where she gets her energy from. She is. Yep. She's
passionate.
She is very passionate.
I love it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But I have to say that God didn't make me like that. So.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. So
absolutely.
But no, it was, I'm glad I could be on the show. I'm glad that I'm supporting you guys, because that makes me feel like, hey, there's another way that I'm still getting the word out and being a part of something.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're excited too. We're super happy that you're a patron, and, it's just awesome. It's cool to get to know our patrons, and, we have a lot of fun with it. So yeah.
I do think that there's two things I think that you need to change, though, if I can put in my 2 cents.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. I think that your mom needs to stop saying Jimmy's mom. She needs to have her own identity.
Okay. Oh, gosh.
You got to go with, like, this is Clara.
This is Granny. Oh, God. Okay.
Something. But you always like, this is Jimmy's mom. No.
Okay.
Jimmy needs to say, you need to start it off, and Jimmy needs to say, I'm Clara's
I'm
son.
Clara's
there
son.
You go. I love that. That's awesome, Kelly. There you
That's
go.
My one. That's my other 2 cents. And my other one is that you need to have like a patron one at night, so that all of us that work all day can be a part of your exclusives.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a very good idea,
because
Kelly.
I can't ever get to them, because I'm working. So I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but it is for me.
It probably is for a portion. Yeah, probably for
a large
quarter,
portion.
probably
I'm
a quarter
sure.
or half.
Yes.
Even if it's just like 1 or 2 here and there. I mean, and because we can always go, can't we always go back and listen to those?
See, this is going to be a plug. So for all you listeners who are not patrons,
yes,
this is why we do a patronage,
Right.
because we always want to make this podcast better. And, Granny and I don't have all the answers.
Oh, gosh.
And we
no.
and we love that we love that we have a community that, you guys are not just financial supporters, like you guys are friends of ours, and
Yes.
you help shape this podcast. So yeah, that's really cool. So thank you, Kelly.
And thank you from Granny.
You're welcome. That was actually fun. Every time I hear you say that on the thing, I'm just like, man, she needs her own identity.
Okay.
I like that idea of reversing it, where I say, "This is Jimmy, and I am Clara's son."
Yeah, I think that just for one episode, just for everybody else.
It would really throw people off.
I think it'll happen.
All right.
So predictable now.
Yep, that's right. Well, Kelly, thanks
I'll
so
let you guys
much.
know.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And
Keep in touch, please.
absolutely. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next episode.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast. Thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker, subscribe on Google Play Music, Apple Podcast, or Stitcher. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.